A former heiress turned housekeeper returns to New York with one mission: to find the son stolen from her 5 years ago. But when Elena Monroe accidentally walks in on the cold-hearted billionaire Damien Vestron, their worlds collide in a twist of fate, secrets, and undeniable tension. As she uncovers betrayal, lies, and a stolen legacy, Elena must risk everything to reclaim her child and her future. Who really holds the key to her past? And will love survive the truth? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. New York City, 2025. The skyline shimmered like a crown of steel and glass beneath the night sky, alive with the hum of ambition and power. In the heart of Manhattan, the towering Vestron Tower Hotel stood like a sentinel of opulence. Its golden lighting, marble pillars, and crystal chandeliers offering refuge to the world's wealthiest. Tonight, it pulsed with energy, hosting a gala reserved only for the elite. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, all converged in designer suits and glittering gowns. But somewhere in the back corridors of this monument to extravagance moved a woman no one noticed. Elena Monroe. Her footsteps echoed softly as she pushed a cleaning cart through the hallway leading to the presidential suite. Her navy housekeeping uniform was neat, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her eyes, those told another story. Fierce and focused, they betrayed a storm within. She wasn't here for laundry or linens. She was here for the truth, the child they stole, the empire they destroyed. Her mission began tonight. 5 years ago, Elena had walked these same halls in heels and silk. She was once the golden daughter of Monroe Dynamics, a rising star prepped to take the reins of her father's revolutionary tech empire. But that life had been ripped from her, by greed, by betrayal, and by blood. Now, she walked unseen, a ghost among the elite. She paused outside Suite 1807, her gloved hand trembling slightly as she reached for the key card. According to the log, the suite was empty. She needed just a few minutes. A glance through the guest folder, a photograph perhaps, anything that might confirm what she'd begun to suspect. That her son was here. That the boy she'd been told was gone forever might be just a few feet away in this building. Elena slid the card and the door clicked open. She stepped inside quietly. The room exuded warmth and luxury, plush carpeting, the soft scent of sandalwood in the air, and dim lights casting golden halos across expensive furniture. She moved toward the minibar, adjusting a towel on the cart as her eyes scanned for clues. And then the sound of running water stopped. Before she could retreat, the bathroom door opened. A tall man stepped into view, steam trailing behind him. His presence filled the room with quiet force. He wore only a white robe, loosely tied at the waist, his dark hair wet from a shower. Elena froze. Her fingers still clutched the towel, heart pounding in her chest. The man noticed her instantly, and in one swift motion, the edge of the door caught the robe, pulling it loose. The fabric slipped to the floor. Elena gasped, cheeks flaming red as she turned around in a panic. I'm sorry," she stammered, reaching for the handle of the cart like it could shield her. "I thought this room was vacant. I'm housekeeping." The man, unfazed, retrieved the robe and tied it calmly back on. His eyes were piercing blue, cold and assessing. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low but firm. "I just told you, I'm with housekeeping," Elena said, trying to steady her breath. There must have been a mistake in the log. He stepped closer. The air seemed to crackle between them. "Do you always walk into private suites unannounced?" Elena straightened. "Only when they're marked empty, sir." Her defiance surprised even herself. It surprised him too. His brow lifted slightly as though intrigued. Their eyes locked, his icy and suspicious, hers smoldering with secrets he couldn't yet fathom. And then, before he could say another word, Elena turned and pushed her cart into the hallway, her heart racing faster than her footsteps. Behind her, Damien Vestron watched, robe secure, but his certainty shaken. CEO of Vestron International, heir to billions, and master of control. He had never seen that woman before. But something about her lingered in his thoughts like an unresolved puzzle. In the staff locker room, Elena slumped against a wall, willing her pulse to calm. That man, Damien Vestron. She knew who he was now, the very face on magazine covers, the titan of the empire tied to the mystery of her missing son. What were the odds she'd stumble into his suite? Her cheeks still burned with embarrassment, but a strange electricity pulsed beneath her skin. She hadn't planned that moment, but maybe, just maybe, fate had. She opened her locker and pulled out a small photograph, a faded picture of a baby boy with a crescent-shaped birthmark on his wrist. Her eyes filled with a quiet ache. Somewhere in this city her son was waiting. She was certain of it now. And even if it meant walking into the lion's den with only a vacuum and a borrowed name, Elena Monroe would find him. Whatever it took. The past had a way of clinging to Elena Monroe, like perfume on skin, faint but always there, never letting her forget. That night, after her narrow encounter with Damien Vestron, she returned to her tiny apartment on the edge of the Bronx. The glow of Manhattan's lights barely reached her window, but it didn't matter. She wasn't here to live the high life. She was here for justice. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop humming quietly in the dark. Fingers flying across the keys, she bypassed the firewalls of Monroe Dynamics. Her father's company, the one that should have been hers. The screen flooded with old emails, board meeting notes, transaction records, fragments of a life that was once hers, now buried under layers of lies. She scrolled until her fingers stopped, her eyes locking on a thread of messages from December 2020. Her jaw clenched. That night, the one that changed everything. It was her family's annual winter gala, held in the very same Vestron Tower hotel she now cleaned. She had been radiant in a silver gown, the favored daughter, heir to a legacy her father had built with sweat and brilliance. Guests toasted to her future, oblivious to the scheme brewing behind their backs. Monica, her sister, 2 years younger, had always envied her. Her status, her closeness with their father, the way the board members listened when she spoke. And Lucille, their cold and calculating stepmother, who had married their father for influence, had no intention of handing over power to a stepdaughter. They waited until Elena was distracted, then made their move. The emails detailed conversations with Gregory Locke, CEO of Locke Industries and Vestron's oldest partner. They had the means and motive. Elena remembered sipping her champagne that night, feeling warm, then dizzy. Monica's laugh had been too sweet, too rehearsed. Then everything went dark. When she awoke, her dress was wrinkled, the bed unfamiliar, and her memories fragmented. A man, Daniel Voss, her ex-boyfriend, had been in the room earlier, she was told. He'd claimed it had been consensual, but Elena had known better. Her head ached, her limbs heavy, and her heart shattered. Daniel had been Monica's pawn, weak, desperate for money, and willing to destroy Elena for it. Weeks later, when Elena discovered she was pregnant, she turned to her father for help. But Monica and Lucille were faster. They spun a tale of disgrace and recklessness, painting Elena as a liability. Her father, heartbroken and manipulated, turned his back on her. "You've embarrassed this family," he'd said. "Leave, and don't come back." And so she did. Elena fled the city with nothing but her savings and a suitcase. In a small village abroad, tucked between pine forests and silent mountains, she gave birth to twins, a girl with eyes like starlight, Aria, and a boy whose cry echoed in her bones, Leo. For 3 days, she lived in a dream of fragile hope, until the morning she woke to find Leo gone. No noise, no struggle, just a note left on the crib. "He belongs to a different legacy now. Don't come looking." Elena had screamed until her voice cracked, but no one listened. No one believed her. With no power, no money, no family to back her, she was alone. She buried the pain, poured everything she had into raising Aria, and started learning. Coding, security, systems. She trained herself in the language of secrets. One day she promised she would come back not just as a mother, but as a storm. And now, 5 years later, here she was, in the lion's den. The emails confirmed what she'd long suspected. Gregory Locke had more involvement than anyone realized. Transactions between Locke Industries and a shadow corporation tied to private adoptions raised every alarm in Elena's mind. The timelines matched. So did the money. Monica and Lucille had sold her son. The rage bubbled inside her, hot and electric, but she kept her composure. Rage wouldn't bring Leo back. Strategy would. She glanced at a drawing Aria had made, a picture of her, Aria, and a boy holding a toy car. "That's my brother," Aria had whispered when she handed it over. "I dream about him, Mommy. He has a moon on his hand, just like me." Elena touched the edge of the paper, her throat tightening, the crescent-shaped birthmark. That was how she'd know. She closed the laptop and rose to her feet, her reflection in the cracked mirror across the room sharp and sure. The woman who had been betrayed, humiliated, and erased no longer existed. What stood now was a mother with fire in her soul. Elena Monroe had returned to New York with nothing but her name, her skill, and a promise etched into her heart. She would find Leo, and she would burn the truth into the city that once cast her out. The next morning, the Vestron Tower Hotel bloomed with color and laughter. Balloons bobbed above white-clothed tables, music drifted through the courtyard, and children in suits and frilly dresses ran between towers of cupcakes and charity banners. It was the annual Vestron Foundation Children's Event. Photo ops for the rich, a PR show for the board, and for Elena Monroe, the chance she'd been waiting for. She moved through the crowd in her uniform, blending in with the staff as she poured punch and picked up discarded napkins. But her eyes never stopped scanning. Every child that passed, every small hand that reached for a cookie, she studied them all. Her chest felt tight with anticipation and dread. Somewhere in this sea of joy might be the boy who had been taken from her arms 5 years ago. Then she saw him. Near the marble fountain at the edge of the plaza, a small boy sat alone. He wore a navy blazer and khaki pants, his dark hair gently tousled by the breeze. In his hands he held a small red toy car, rolling it back and forth across the rim of the stone. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't playing with the others. He just sat, eyes distant, lost in some quiet world of his own. Elena's heart slammed in her chest. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up, carrying her closer step by step until she could see it. The small, crescent-shaped birthmark on the inside of his left wrist. Her breath caught. Her knees trembled. She knew that mark. Arya had it too. It was him, Leo. She nearly collapsed from the force of it. Every cell in her body screamed to run, to grab him, to hold him and never let go. But she couldn't. Not yet. She didn't know who had him, how he'd ended up here, or what kind of power stood between them. So she stood, frozen, drinking in every detail. His shy movements, the curve of his cheek, the way he clutched that little car like it was everything. A voice sliced through the moment. "Leo, stop dawdling. You're embarrassing me." Elena turned to see a tall woman striding toward the boy. Blonde hair sculpted into a severe twist, high heels clicking against the pavement, designer sunglasses pushed atop her head like a crown. Vanessa Locke. Elena recognized her immediately, from tabloids, from business reports. The daughter of Gregory Locke, Damien Vestron's rumored fiancé. Vanessa knelt, grabbing the toy car out of Leo's hand. "Do you want to be known as the weird little boy who plays alone? Start acting normal." Leo flinched, his small frame shrinking under her gaze. Elena's fingers curled into fists. Every instinct in her screamed to step in, but she forced herself to stay put, her eyes burning. Vanessa rose, tossing the toy back down with disdain. "Honestly, I don't know why Damien insists on keeping you around. You're not even his." That sentence hit Elena like a punch to the gut. Not even his. So Damien wasn't the father. Vanessa had said it without thinking, her voice full of irritation, not secrecy. That meant the adoption wasn't legal. There might be a way to prove it. Vanessa swept away in a flurry of silk and perfume, leaving Leo behind. Elena approached slowly, crouching a few feet away, her voice soft. "That's a cool car. Does it go fast?" Leo looked up, startled, but said nothing. His big eyes, so much like Arya's, studied her. "I used to play with a car just like that when I was little," she said gently. "It had a blue stripe and everything. Yours is even better." He gave a tiny nod, still silent, but his hand moved to push the car toward her. She smiled, tears pressing behind her eyes. "Thanks, buddy. That's really kind of you." Just then, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Elena?" She turned, pulse spiking. Damien Vestron stood a few yards away, watching her. His sharp suit matched the glint in his eye, but his face wasn't cold. It was curious, even concerned. "I didn't realize you were assigned to this event," he said. Elena stood quickly, schooling her features. They needed extra help. Damien's gaze flicked between her and Leo, and something unreadable passed over his expression. "He doesn't usually talk to strangers," he said. "You must be good with kids." She forced a smile. "Some just need a little kindness." He looked at her a moment longer, then nodded and walked away, calling for Leo to follow. The boy hesitated, glancing back at her once more before trailing after him. Elena stood rooted to the ground, breath shallow, She had seen him, touched his hand, heard his silence, and now she knew beyond doubt Leo was hers. But reclaiming him would take more than a moment by a fountain. It would take war. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The image of Leo sitting alone by the fountain haunted her. The curve of his shoulders, the way he flinched under Vanessa's cold voice, the quiet courage in his eyes when he passed her the toy car. She sat at her desk in the dim light of her apartment, the soft hum of the city outside barely reaching her. Arya was already asleep in the next room, her drawings of mommy, me, and brother taped to the walls like prayers in crayon. Elena touched one of them, her chest aching. Time was running out. She had to act before they took him from her again. She opened her laptop and began combing through encrypted files she had copied from the Vestron servers. Weeks of stealth, misdirection, and late-night access had finally paid off. Deep in a hidden drive, she found what she'd been hunting for, a money trail linking Gregory Locke to a series of shell companies, all involved in offshore wire transfers, falsified documentation, and most damning of all, a flagged adoption dossier. The child's name had been changed, redacted, buried in red tape, but the birth date matched, the timing matched. And in the bottom corner of the document, barely visible, was her signature, copied and forged. Leo. She stared at the screen, her heart thudding in her ears. Vanessa and Gregory had purchased her son, wrapped it in paperwork, and passed it off as mercy. But there was more. Emails between Locke and Monica discussing removing the final obstacle to control the Monroe estate. A digital copy of a second will, doctored and time-stamped after her father's death, sat attached. The truth had been there all along, just out of reach. She downloaded everything, saving backups onto 3 separate drives. Evidence now lived in more than one place. No one would erase her this time. The next morning, she arrived at Vestron Enterprises to find herself reassigned. Word had come from Damien Vestron himself. She was no longer a temp. She was now his personal executive assistant. The news rippled through the office like wildfire. Eyes followed her as she stepped into the elevator. Whispers trailed behind her heels. A housekeeper turned assistant? It was unheard of. Elena kept her head high. She didn't need approval, she needed access. Damien's office was a world of steel, glass, and silence. The skyline unfurled behind him like a painting, and he stood at the window, hands in his pockets, when she entered. "You handled yourself well at the event," he said without turning. "Leo doesn't warm up to people easily." "I didn't do much," she said cautiously. "Just offered him kindness." "That's more than most do," he replied, finally facing her. His blue eyes met hers, not cold this time, but searching. "I could use someone with instincts like that, someone who notices what others don't." Elena nodded slowly. "Then let's get to work." Over the next few days, she threw herself into the role, organizing schedules, running logistics, reviewing vendor contracts. It was exhausting, but worth it. Every meeting brought her deeper into Vestron's structure, and closer to uncovering the Locke's influence. Her proximity to Damien, however, came with its own complications. He was sharp, methodical, always watching. There were moments, brief, disarming moments, when his mask slipped. When he'd ask her something personal like why she never mentioned family, or what she thought of Manhattan at night. She never gave more than she had to, but inside, her defenses trembled. Because every time he looked at her with those eyes, she remembered that he wasn't just Leo's guardian. He was the man who unknowingly held her son's future in his hands. And perhaps, without realizing it, her heart. Her plan was moving fast, but then came the day that shifted everything. She returned to her desk to find Vanessa Locke standing there, perfectly poised in designer silk, her expression acidic. "I see you've climbed the ladder, impressive for someone who used to scrub floors." Elena didn't flinch. "Some of us do more than inherit power. We earn it." Vanessa's smile tightened. "Stay away from Leo. He's not your concern." Elena's gaze turned cold. "He's a child. He deserves care, not control." "Damien will marry me," Vanessa snapped. "And when he does, I'll be the one raising that boy. You'll be out of the picture." Elena leaned in, voice low and unshaken. "We'll see about that." That night, she placed the final piece of her plan into motion. The rooftop of Vestron Tower overlooked the city. She stood there alone, gripping the flash drive tightly. The truth was a storm waiting to be unleashed. And Elena Monroe was done waiting. The gala sparkled with dangerous perfection. The Vestron Tower's grand atrium was transformed into a crystal kingdom, chandeliers dripping with light, velvet-draped tables lining the marble floor, and a string quartet floating music through the air like silk. It was Gregory Locke's 65th birthday celebration, but to Elena Monroe, it was war. She stood near the back of the crowd, her black dress simple, elegant, deliberately understated. In her purse, a small flash drive pulsed like a heartbeat. On it lived everything: the forged will, the smuggling documents, the proof that her father's empire had been stolen and her son trafficked through lies. Across the room, Vanessa Locke shimmered in gold, clinging to Damien's arm like a victory prize. He wore his usual tailored suit, but Elena saw the tension in his shoulders, the storm behind his eyes. Since their last confrontation, something had shifted. He had been quieter, more careful. She wasn't sure if it was suspicion or curiosity. Then she saw Leo, sitting quietly beside a stern-looking nanny near the stage. His little hands clutched that same red toy car. His blazer looked too stiff for him, his feet swung above the ground. Her heart swelled with emotion. She didn't wave, didn't draw attention, but their eyes met. And something passed between them, a flicker, a knowing. The moment shattered when Vanessa leaned down and whispered something harsh into Leo's ear. He shrank in his seat, and Elena's fists clenched. A bell rang out, the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium, raising a glass. To Gregory Locke, whose vision and partnership have shaped this city's skyline, Elena moved. She slipped from the crowd, up the side staircase and into the control room where her ally, a technician she'd quietly recruited, waited, eyes wide. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," she whispered. "Play it during the final toast." He nodded, slipping the flash drive into the media server. Back in the ballroom, Gregory rose to speak, charming and smug. "Tonight we celebrate legacy," he said. "Partnerships that have built empires and families that will carry us into the future." Elena returned to the floor, standing just behind the final row of chairs, her heart pounding. Gregory lifted his glass high. "To the next generation." The screen behind him flickered. Then came the emails, the invoices, the redacted documents and timestamps. The crowd gasped. A cascade of corruption flooded the screen. Forged adoption papers, offshore transfers, smuggled tech, Monica's emails arranging her father's will to be falsified. Gasps turned to murmurs, then to shouts. "What the hell is this?" Gregory barked. Elena stepped forward. "My name is Elena Monroe," she said, her voice steady and amplified. "And I'm here to take back what was stolen. My father's legacy, my company, and my son." A stunned silence rippled through the room. Vanessa launched forward, her face twisted in rage. "You liar, you're nothing. Damien, tell them, she's lying." But Damien wasn't moving. He stared at the screen, the truth unspooling like a rope tightening around his chest. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low, raw. "Leo, is he your son?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I didn't know you had him until I saw him. I thought I'd lost him forever. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd shut me out. I couldn't lose him again." The room spun and Damien's jaw clenched, but then Leo's voice rang out, small, uncertain. "Mom?" Everyone turned. The boy stood up, his little fists clenched around his toy. "Is she my mom?" Elena dropped to her knees. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your mom." Leo ran into her arms, and everything else, Vanessa's screaming, Gregory's threats, Monica's pale face as security escorted her out, faded into a blur. Later, in a quiet lounge above the chaos, Damien stood across from Elena. He looked broken, stunned, but beneath the shock was something else, something vulnerable. "Why didn't you trust me?" "I wanted to," she whispered, "but I couldn't risk him, not after everything." He stepped closer. "He's mine too now, you know that." Elena nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "So what happens now?" Damien looked out the window, then back at her. "We fight. Together." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The boy who had been lost was now home. And though the war had only just begun, Elena Monroe would never fight alone again. Sometimes the deepest strength is found not in power or revenge, but in love and truth. Elena Monroe's journey teaches us that even after betrayal, loss, and unimaginable heartbreak, it is possible to rise again, not by becoming harder, but by staying true to your heart. She didn't just fight for her son or her inheritance. She fought to reclaim her identity, her voice, and the future that was stolen from her. Her courage reminds us that justice takes time, that healing takes effort, and that family isn't defined by blood or contracts, but by the bonds we protect and nurture. Damien's transformation shows that even those who have built walls around their hearts can choose change. When faced with truth and love, even the coldest hearts can thaw. And Leo, the child caught in the crossfire, became the very soul that reminded them both of what truly mattered. This story is about justice, yes, but more than that, it's about redemption. About finding your place in a world that tried to erase you. About standing tall, even when you're shaking inside. Elena's fight was long and painful, but in the end, love won, not through vengeance, but through truth and resilience. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you felt moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful journey like this one. Thank you for being here.